There is one shift in thinking that separates people who constantly move forward in life from people who stay stuck in the same patterns year after year. It is not a complicated technique. It does not require years of therapy or a psychology degree or any special ability that certain people have and others do not. It is a single, learnable shift in the way you relate to your own mind. And once you understand it and actually begin applying it, almost everything in your life starts to look and feel different. I want to be careful here, because the word trick in the context of psychology can sound like a shortcut or a hack, and that is not what this is. What this is a fundamental reorientation of how you interact with your own thoughts, your own emotions, and ultimately your own behavior. It is simple to explain and genuinely difficult to practice consistently. But the results of practicing it consistently are so significant that I think it deserves to be talked about far more openly than it usually is. So let me start at the beginning. Your mind produces thoughts constantly, thousands of them every single day. Evaluations, judgments, memories, predictions, fears, desires, commentaries on everything you experience and everyone you encounter. This is what minds do. It is their function. It is not something you asked for, and it is not something you can stop. But here is where almost everyone goes wrong, and where an understanding of basic psychology can change everything. Most people believe that they are their thoughts. They experience a thought, and they treat it as truth. They feel an emotion, and they treat it as reality. They have a belief, and they assume it accurately reflects the world as it actually is. This automatic identification with our own mental content is so deep and so constant that most people never question it. It just feels like the way things are. Your thoughts feel like you. Your feelings feel like facts. Your beliefs feel like perceptions. But they are not. And the moment you genuinely understand that they are not just intellectually, not just as an interesting idea, but as a lived, practiced, daily reality, everything changes. The psychological principle I am describing has a name. It is called cognitive defusion, and it comes from a branch of psychology called acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by psychologist Stephen Hayes over several decades of research and clinical work. Defusion sounds technical, but the concept is remarkably simple. Fusion is what happens when you are completely merged with your thoughts. When a thought appears and you automatically believe it, react to it, and allow it to direct your behavior without any space or examination between the thought and your response. Defusion is what happens when you create distance between yourself and your thoughts. When you can observe a thought as a thought, examine it, evaluate whether it is actually true or useful, and choose how to respond to it rather than simply reacting automatically. The difference between those two states is the difference between being controlled by your mind and learning to work with it. Let me give you a concrete example, because this is the kind of concept that sounds abstract until you see it applied to something real. Imagine you are about to do something outside your comfort zone. Maybe it is speaking in front of people, or starting a difficult conversation, or taking a professional risk that matters to you. And your mind produces a thought. A very common, very familiar thought that millions of people have in exactly this situation. The thought is, I am going to fail. In a state of fusion, that thought lands as a fact. Your body responds to it as if failure is already happening. Your heart rate increases. Your confidence drops. You start looking for reasons to avoid the situation. And more often than not, you do avoid it. The thought directed your behavior without you ever consciously choosing to let it. Now, imagine the same situation, the same thought, but this time, instead of the thought landing as a fact, you observe it as a thought. You notice it. You might even name it. There is that prediction of failure again. You see it as a product of a mind that is wired to anticipate danger, not as an accurate preview of what is actually going to happen. From that position of observation, you have a choice. You can acknowledge the thought, recognize that it is not a fact, and proceed with what you intended to do anyway. The thought is still there. You have not suppressed it or argued it away. You have simply stepped back far enough to see it for what it is, a thought, not a verdict. That small shift in relationship to the thought changes everything about what happens next. Now, here is why this matters so profoundly, and why I think it is genuinely one of the most important things a person can learn about how their own mind works. Most of the things that hold people back in life are not external obstacles, they are internal ones. The fear that convinces you not to try, the self-critical voice that tells you that you are not good enough, the belief that things cannot change because they never have before, the story that you are the kind of person who does not succeed at things like this. All of those things are thoughts. They are mental events. They are products of a mind that is doing what minds do, pattern matching, predicting, protecting, and generating commentary on everything it encounters. They feel enormously real and enormously powerful, and as long as you are completely fused with them, they are powerful, because they are directing your behavior unchallenged. But they are not facts about you or about the world. They are thoughts, and thoughts can be observed, examined, and ultimately defused of the automatic authority they have been given. This is the shift. This is what changes everything. Not eliminating difficult thoughts, which is impossible. Not positive thinking, which requires you to replace one thought with another and maintain that replacement through constant effort. But genuine defusion, learning to see your thoughts as thoughts and choosing your responses rather than being driven by your reactions. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like in practice, because understanding it conceptually is only the beginning. The first step is simply noticing. Before you can defuse from a thought, you have to be aware that you are having one. This sounds obvious, but it is genuinely difficult in the beginning, because fusion happens so quickly and so automatically that thoughts often direct behavior before conscious awareness even catches up. Start by paying attention to the moments when you feel a strong negative reaction: anxiety, anger, shame, defeat, overwhelm, overworked. In those moments, pause for just a second and ask yourself what thought just occurred. What did your mind just tell you? Usually there is a specific thought underneath the feeling, and identifying it is the first step toward defusing from it. The second step is labeling. Once you have identified the thought, try labeling it as a thought rather than a fact. Instead of "I am going to fail," try "I am having the thought that I am going to fail." Instead of "I am not good enough," try "I am noticing a thought that says I am not good enough." This sounds small. It feels almost silly the first time you do it. But pay attention to what happens in your body and your mind when you make that shift. There is usually a subtle but real loosening, a slight decrease in the intensity of the feeling, a small but meaningful increase in the sense that you have some agency in the situation. The label creates distance. Distance creates choice. The third step is allowing. One of the most counterproductive things people do with difficult thoughts and feelings is fight against them. They try to suppress them, argue with them, distract themselves from them, or shame themselves for having them. All of those responses increase the power of the thought rather than decreasing it. Defusion does not involve fighting. It involves allowing the thought to be there, seeing it, acknowledging it, and not needing it to leave before you can move forward. You can carry an uncomfortable thought and still act on your values. You can feel afraid and still do the thing you were afraid to do. The thought does not have to be gone for your behavior to change. There is a metaphor that researchers in this field often use, and I find it genuinely useful for understanding the relationship between you and your thoughts. Imagine you are a bus driver. The bus is your life, and you are driving it toward a destination that matters to you. Your thoughts and feelings are passengers on the bus. Some of them quiet and pleasant, some of them loud and difficult. Some of them actively trying to tell you that you are going the wrong way and that you should turn around immediately. In a state of fusion, those difficult passengers have taken over the wheel. They are driving the bus. You are in the back, going wherever they take you. Defusion is getting back behind the wheel. Not throwing the difficult passengers off the bus. They will reboard at the next stop anyway. But reclaiming your role as the driver. The passengers can say whatever they want. You decide where the bus goes. That image, you as the driver, thoughts as passengers, is worth sitting with, because it reframes the entire project of managing your mind.
It is not about silencing the difficult passengers. It is about remembering who is actually driving.
I want to address something that often comes up when people encounter this idea for the first time. They ask, if I diffuse from my negative thoughts, does that mean I ignore them? Does it mean I pretend everything is fine when it is not? Does it mean I dismiss valid concerns or override legitimate feelings? No, absolutely not. Diffusion does not mean dismissing thoughts. It means examining them. Some thoughts your mind produces are genuinely useful. They are accurate assessments of real risks, valid emotional signals that something important needs attention, or realistic evaluations of a situation. Those thoughts deserve to be heard and acted on. The difference is that diffusion allows you to evaluate the thought rather than automatically obey it. Instead of the thought triggering an immediate reaction, you have the space to ask, is this thought actually true? Is it useful? Is it helping me move towards something that matters, or is it pulling me away from it? Sometimes the answer is that the thought is accurate and important. In that case, you respond to it thoughtfully. Sometimes the answer is that the thought is an old pattern, a fear response, a cognitive distortion that your mind produces out of habit, but that does not actually reflect reality accurately. In that case, you can acknowledge it without obeying it. That evaluation, that genuine, clear-eyed assessment of whether a thought is serving you, is only possible from a position of diffusion. From inside the thought, completely fused with it, that kind of evaluation is impossible. The reason I believe this particular psychological principle changes everything is because of how broadly it applies. It applies to the self-doubt that keeps talented people from pursuing what they are capable of. It applies to the anger that destroys relationships that could otherwise be repaired. It applies to the anxiety that makes simple decisions feel impossible. It applies to the grief that, when diffused from rather than fused with, can be felt fully and moved through rather than getting stuck. It applies to the perfectionism that paralyzes people mid-action. It applies to the shame that keeps people hiding instead of growing. Every single one of those experiences involves a thought, a mental event that has been given automatic authority over behavior. And every single one of them responds to the same basic intervention: stepping back, seeing the thought as a thought, and choosing a response rather than being driven by a reaction. This is not a cure for everything. Human suffering is real and complex, and diffusion is not a magic erasure of difficulty. But it is a tool that, practiced consistently over time, changes the entire texture of your relationship with your own mind. And a different relationship with your own mind is, in the most literal sense, a different life. Start small. Start today. The next time your mind produces a thought that feels like a wall, a thought that tells you that you cannot, that you are not enough, that things will not work out, that you should stop, pause for just a moment before you respond. Notice the thought. Name it as a thought. Ask whether it is actually true or simply familiar. And then choose what happens next based on what you value, not based on what your mind automatically generated in a moment of stress or fear. That pause, that small, practiced daily pause between thought and response, that is where everything changes.